value is already within your company sometimes. You don't always have to go out and spend £250,000 a year on some superstar. Sometimes those superstars are already there.
Alex, who is responsible for 56 founder exits, totaling a value of over 100 million.
But there are 6 certainly critical things that we can discuss today. But how do you define what a key person is? I would say you just know.
First ever exit, which is your own company in 2008.
It's one of the pieces of advice I give to founders at the start, which is...
Before we jump in, I want to give a huge shout out to Scripe, who sponsor this podcast. Now, I actually approached Scripe to sponsor the podcast because I'm such a big fan of the tool they've built. Scripe is an all-in-one LinkedIn content assistant that will even build your strategy for you. It's like having a strategist, a content writer, and an analyst in your pocket. And I use it to save 10 hours every week when I'm creating content. First, I review my content performance using their in-depth analytics, which neatly show me what content types are performing the best. Then I use their inspiration feature to find viral posts from other creators to inspire my own. Whenever I have ideas, I upload recordings of calls I've had with my team, personal voice notes, or even YouTube videos I've created. And this is where Scripe is worth its weight in gold. It's analysed all of my previous content to get my tone down to a T. And it then uses the sources I share to write engaging and optimized content. And for just £1.16 a day, it really is a no-brainer. Click the link in the show notes and use the code KUROGO25 for $25 off your first month. That's KUROGO25. Hi guys, welcome back to another edition of Success Clues. This podcast is called Success Clues because, well, success leaves clues. And smart people, they learn from other smart people who have got to where they want to go. Most people learn from their own mistakes, and stupid people, well, they've already got all of the answers. Every single episode we record here is designed to take you from A to B and leave you with actionable strategies you can use to grow your business. Today we're joined by Alex, who is responsible for 56 founder exits, totaling a value of over 100 million, I believe.
Hundreds of millions.
And if you listen to what he has to say, you are going to learn how to build and exit your business for a life-changing amount of money. I'm so excited for this one. Alex, I want to take you back actually to your first ever exit, which is your own company in 2008.
That's correct.
What was that process like?
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking, exciting, up until the last minute of deal could or could not happen. You never quite know with these things. But fortunately went through, was successful for me. And enabled me then to take a bit of time and think what I was going to do next. And as it was, I decided to help more founders, I guess to make them as, if not more successful, with less stress than learn the things that, the good, the bad and the ugly that I'd gone through.
I'm sure there was lots of good, lots of bad and lots of ugly, which we'll dive into today. What was the business, for those that haven't come across before, what was the business you initially exited?
Yeah, so we had a peer-to-peer learning group. So we had groups of founders, business owners, who would get together face to face, like a lot of people used to do in the good old days, and we do shared peer-to-peer learning. So you've got 15 heads who could help each other, learn from each other, share their collective wisdoms, and we'd bring in an expert speaker for each session who would then sort of lead a debate around a particular hot topic to do with building and running a more successful company. So amazing successful. We had groups in London, Manchester, Birmingham, so around the country. Got up to about 120 founders who were members. Wow. And created this fantastic model that then a third company decided they wanted and to scale, and so they bought the business.
And what was the business? Was it membership based?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's a subscription based business. People paid on an annual basis to join, but most people stayed, and I think the average was about 3.5 years people stayed for, but the business had only been going for about 5-6 years at the point we sold it. So it was learning and evolving and developing even at the point of sale.
Yeah. Was there anything that, if you could go back to that point now, selling your own business and your first business at the time, that you wish you knew in order to get a better exit, a better multiple, better terms? Yeah,
I think one of the things I really emphasise now with other founders I advise is around planning. And the importance of planning ahead. If you're going to sell a company, the worst time to start planning for it is today. If you're going to sell it tomorrow, you want to start years in advance. And sometimes even when you're starting the company, there are things that you can do to help it. So for me, if I'd planned a bit earlier and a bit better, I think it could have been even more successful. So for example, if we knew we were going to sell at that point, we could have had an even bigger push to get even more numbers up in terms of membership, and potentially looked at the profit a bit more as well. So it would have increased the valuation of the business.
And you've now got 6 things that you do with the founders you advise to help them prepare for a successful exit, right? And these are some of the things that you wish you should have done, right?
Yeah, that's right. And look, experience is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And hindsight's a wonderful thing, both in terms of your own experiences. But, I've gone on to advise, hundreds of companies now. And, I currently sit on the board of 25 businesses. And so for all of those experiences, and I've chaired almost 2,000 board meetings. So you just absorb huge amounts of information, and there's stuff's good and stuff that's bad. And obviously you forget the stuff that's bad. Apart from, you need that as to help others, to advise them to make sure that they avoid making the same mistakes. So, but there are 6 certainly critical things that we can discuss today. But underneath those 6, there's hundreds more smaller things. But there's just some high-level stuff that people should definitely think about before a future exit.
Amazing. Well, let's take people through those 6 things and give them kind of a roadmap to their own exit. What are the 6 things, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, the first one for me is creating scalable processes. So anyone who's going to buy a business, unless it's a strategic purchase, they're probably buying it because they want to evolve it. They want to make it bigger. And if you've got something which has got proven scalable processes, it makes it a lot easier for them to come on board, follow your A, B, and C model, and take it to the next stage. So I developed something that I call Company in a Box. And fundamentally, Company in a Box is a range of things that you need to review and then improve and then make a process within your business. So as an example, it might be something to do with your people. So, how do you interview people? How do you onboard your people? How do you do learning and development with your people? And so you get a collection of people in the company, and not necessarily the people that work within the people division, the HR division, but actually a range of other people, because my philosophy on life as well as in business is that I know things that you don't know, and you know things that I don't know. So I believe if you give people the right environment and the right parameters, then they might come up with ideas that are better than me for improving that part of the business. So I might get someone from finance or marketing or sales, all then reviewing what we've done historically in terms of hiring people, and then making their recommendations on how they think it should be improved. And then we turn it into a process. And if you do that across 10, 12 core parts of the business, such as, marketing, sales, people, finance, operations, etc., you've got a constant stream of people in the business all looking to improve your company and looking for marginal gains across all these different parts. And at the end of it, if you imagine almost like a buyer coming to a company and they pull out a folder, and that folder says, here's how we hire people. Another one, here's how we do marketing. Here's how we do sales. Then even if you were, to get run over by that proverbial bus that everyone talks about, it means that they can just take it on and they can evolve it. So it's a great indicator for a buyer in terms of how well you run your business. If you do it right, you'll improve your business with those marginal gains across every part of the company. Plus, and this is a really lovely little byproduct, is you get everyone involved in it. And let's just call it Project X for a better expression. Everyone's now accountable for improving the business. And so you don't get staff going, yeah, but it's the boss's fault that we haven't done this, we haven't done that. It's everyone's fault if we're not improving the company. And so you get everyone involved, everyone gets excited by it, you get more motivated people, they're more engaged with the business, you can empower people more, which of course upskills people as well. Plus you get maybe 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, who knows how many people in your business, all contributing with their ideas on how to improve it.
I guess this is the sort of stuff that's usually done on just by the founder. It's only the founder doing it, and it's completely in the founder's head.
Absolutely. And it's that the stress that founders put on themselves. Whereas actually, I find everyone wants to contribute in a company. There's very few people just join a company just to take the money if you engage them. And I think a lot of people don't engage them, and particularly junior people. Actually, they can be brilliant. I mean, if a junior person's got 1-2 years experience at another company, for example, then they've already learned stuff from that company. And therefore, why would you not tap into it? So I also do entrance interviews as part of this process, where you're talking to anyone who comes in. When they join, I say to them, this is the way that we run our company in a box. We want to get you involved, but can I ask you a few questions now? What did you like about your last company? What was the training like? What was the remuneration like? What were the reward structures like? What was the way that they work? What did you like about them? What did you dislike about them? So I'm constantly building and evolving my businesses. And so that's one of the things now I pass on to the boards and the founders I advise that they can do. It costs nothing, but the results can be incredible. And some of those ideas, I mean, there was one idea in a meeting about 2 years ago, and I remember it very clearly, where we had people from different divisions and we got them to look at the sales side of the business. And one of them came up with this concept. None of us had ever thought of it before. In the next 2 years, they made over £2 million just directly from that one idea, from someone who was in a completely different department from sales.
Yeah.
So the value is already within your company sometimes. You don't always have to go out and spend £250,000 a year on some superstar. Sometimes those superstars are already there.
You're just not right under your nose, and you're almost not looking at it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how does this company in a box? How does this help with selling the business and getting a better valuation?
Yeah, I think the key thing is that if I was a buyer looking at a company like that, and of course I've been on the other side, I've seen buyers come into meetings with companies I've advised who have now got company in a box in place, and when they come in, we proudly tell them about this is one of the things we do. We can put it into the due diligence process. And when buyers, without fail, I've never seen anyone who hasn't come in and gone, this is really impressive.
Really?
This is how a company should be run. And inevitably, because the companies have been doing it years in advance of a potential sale, they have improved. So their curve has gone like this, whereas other people's curve might be going like that or flatlined. They're constantly doing this because of the engagement and the process behind it. And therefore, you get bigger valuations, you get multiple offers, you get more people interested in you because they all want a piece of this type of company. This is the type of business. It's the utopia that everyone wants to invest into.
Amazing. So the first thing, create scalable processes, build your company in a box. Number one step to getting a better valuation. What's number two?
The next one is, and I'm going to use the word my here, which sounds a bit sort of like it's all about me, but my exit ready health check. So again, through experience and being through so many events and successful events, with founders, I've developed what I know buyers are likely to want within your business. What they want and what they don't want. And so I almost have like a tick box, for want of a better expression, where people can go through, but again, years in advance of a future exit. You do not do this in the due diligence process at the end, which is what most people do, because that's stressful. It adds loads of time and effort and pain into a situation that you don't need, because it's already going to be a very busy and sometimes painful situation. There's a lot of time involved with it. And founders, I think, don't quite realize how much time is involved in that part of the process. So by doing it years in advance, again, you can get all the things done. You can do it in priority order. And again, it also, that checklist, once you go through it, gives you an opportunity to feed that back into company in a box, because you're reviewing all the key due diligence parts of a business in this health check. And so by definition, when you're going through it, you can go, oh, we haven't got that. How could we improve that? Or we do have that. How could we improve it? So to me, it's a really essential bit. And again, you can get other people involved in the business. You can get people empowered, engaged. You won't necessarily want everyone to know you're selling in the company, but obviously the senior leadership team, certainly the stakeholders who might have shares or equity in the company, they will probably be aware. So by definition, they can all share within it. So it's not just down to the founder. And that's the point you're raising before. You can spread that load across lots of different people who can help you within it, even sometimes your board advisors.
Yeah. And what are some of the sorts of things you're looking at in that health check?
Yeah, there are a range of things. I'd say there's probably 10 main topics. And then underneath that, you've got roughly about 10 to 20 questions per topic.
Okay.
So as an example, if we talked about financial stability, it's one of the key things that any buyer is going to be looking at, that there's consistent growth, or hopefully consistent growth. But underneath that, what are you doing to ensure that that's most likely to happen? So your first question might be, well, it's financial stability, but underneath that, do we have a great 3-year finance plan? and has that broken down into monthly targets? And do we as a board look at the variance, positive or negative, every single month against every single line to prove to a buyer that we are very close, we're good at budgeting, we're good at forecasting revenue? Because again, if you're producing a forward plan saying buy it because in the next 3 years this company is going to be this big, and it's the same with raising investment as well, if you've got proof that you can do that, then of course that makes them feel better that it's likely to happen. So you get less risky earnouts. Founders can leave more quicker and to start the process, which is of course what most founders want to do, because one of the reasons why they do longer earnouts is because of the risk, and they don't necessarily trust you because there isn't that proof. So if you've got that proof, that's a great example. But again, you'll look at your sales and marketing strategy. You can look at if it's technology, you might be looking at IP. But even if you're not a technology company, most companies these days in due diligence process will want to see how you protected yourself, future-proofed yourself because of AI and what's coming and the technology that you use. So lots of different areas, loads of different questions.
It's so interesting. It is literally sales, but the product is your company.
Yeah.
And you can't sell a crap product, right?
Absolutely.
I've realised this as you're talking.
Yeah, you've got to position yourself in the right way, don't you? And it's the way that I describe it is a bit like when you're trying to sell a company. It's a bit like when you try to buy a house or a flat or whatever you live in. And when the buyer comes into the first room, if they see a crack on the wall or the ceiling, what do they do with the rest of the process? And you look around the house, you start looking at everything more closely.
Looking for problems, aren't they?
That's due diligence.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, if you've got those cracks all sorted, then they tend to be a little bit smoother and a little bit easier in terms of that process.
Of course, one of the other things you'll definitely need to sell a company is having a good team around you, which is the third thing, right, on your list of 6.
Yeah, absolutely. So building the right senior management team is essential. Now, of course, everyone in the company should be essential, and there are lots of things you can do to buy people in. But, and I've had a case recently with this where 2 years ago, I was talking to a founder. They engaged me. Now, at that point, they thought they wanted a future event, but there was no desperate need for them to do it. The company was great, profitable. He had a nice lifestyle, decent house already. So, that was okay. But actually, I said to him, if one of the options in the future is that if someone comes along and wants to buy the business, then there are things that you need to do now. And then I talked about, and I'll discuss these in a second, the things you need to do now to make sure that if that eventuality happened and you changed your mind, because 2 years is a long time, you could easily change your mind in that. Your circumstances could change. So he agreed that we need to put all options on the table. So I said, one of the things you need to do is you've got quite an inexperienced senior leadership team. So we needed to add one person to it, which was in a COO role. And we needed one person in the company who was in a sort of sales manager role to step up. You can't go from sales manager to managing director like that. So what you do is you put a learning development plan in advance. This was over 2 years or over 12 months, where we said, here are all the things. We actually wrote the job spec for the MD.
Interesting.
And we said, here are all the things that someone needs to do. We compared it to that individual. Here's what they're doing well, but here's the areas of development. And you can't do all those things overnight. So we set milestones in a development plan, a bit like a project management timetable almost, but for an individual. And then over those 12 months, develop them. Then in the next 6 months, we then deliberately moved the founder away from the business. Rarely got involved in the day-to-day operations. Rarely got involved with anything to do with clients. And also in terms of the team as well. They might get involved in some senior hires, some key decisions, some innovative sort of strategies. But we moved them away. Now, amazingly, then someone came along and wanted to buy the business, which wasn't expected. And all of a sudden he went, actually, I'm kind of interested to have a look at this now. Yeah. Whereas if he hadn't have thought ahead, or I hadn't helped him think ahead, just because I've seen it so many times, we wouldn't put that plan in place. Now, that person then went into the process, and actually the MD, which is what they became, they led a lot of the sale process because they were the person who were running the company. They were the person who were going to lead the team afterwards, not the founder. And at the end of the process, which actually was quite a quick process, it only was about 3 or 4 months, which is quite unusual these days. At the end of it, they said, we only need you for 3 months to the founder, and then you can walk. Which is almost utopia, isn't it, for a founder in terms of an exit. So it's looking further ahead. So in your people, by getting the right team in place, you can actually massively reduce your earnout, which is obviously risky. And I could give loads of examples where earnouts have not worked out and people have lost money. And you obviously want to try and get as much as you can. In this case, the founder actually got 2/3 up front. The other third was guaranteed, so no milestones needed to be achieved, and we've been paid over 2 years just because of a cash flow reason.
That's
so
really good.
Amazing result, and of course from that person's perspective, they've now got the rest of their life to decide what they're going to do.
And buyers are literally looking at the senior team that you have in place. Right, when they're
management due diligence is absolutely important. Well, particularly if you're being bought, for example, by a private equity or venture capital company, there's a good chance they haven't got an expertise in what you do, or they haven't got the person who's going to slot in to run the company. So by definition, they will want the earnout to be over 3 or 4 years because there's that risk element to them. So management due diligence becomes ever more prevalent. However, if you can develop those individuals in the way that I discussed before, then when they come along, they're investing in the team who's going on. So if the founder, for example, has been sailing around the world for the last 12 months and has had literally no contact to do with the company, then the private equity company, the buyer, trade, whoever it's going to be, they don't care. They're just interested in the team who are going to be taking it on. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be an earnout, because there's still an element of risk for them. But if those individuals who are going to be the team that carries it on have been running the company for the previous 12, 24 months, and the results have been fantastic, that's the team that delivered those results. It wasn't the founder, it wasn't majority shareholders, it was that operational team. So as long as they're in place and you can prove, and it's always about proof and reducing risk, but if you can prove that they've been there and they were the team that have run it, then you might not need to be tied in for quite as long afterwards. And
you mentioned MD, Managing Director, and COO. Are those the two most important roles, you think, for a business? Are there any others that they should think about?
In terms of from the founder's perspective?
Yeah, in terms of securing a good exit, are those kind of the key roles that you've got to have in place?
I mean, if you look at any purchase in a company, there are over really 2 or 3 things that a buyer are going to be looking for. It's either going to be IP, so in which case, it's going to be the IP, and probably the CTO or CIO is going to become more important. It might be you need someone in terms of security. I mean, if you're fintech, for example, security is going to be super important. If you're a sales-based or services-based company, then probably your sales director. So whether that's going to be a sales director or a CRO, a modern way of calling it. And if you're running a marketing agency, it might be your CMO is the most important. So it will depend on your company and your niche. But getting those senior people in place is absolutely essential.
It's not just the senior people either, though, is it? You have something called the B-suite.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the B-suite is what I define as any key person in a company. Now, how do you define what a key person is? I would say you just know. It's a person that if they left the business, it will have an impact on the company. So it could be someone who's a future star, who's developing in their career, and they're essential for the next stage of the development and growth for the company. It could be someone who's just brilliant in their role, who adds tremendous value to the business. We actually did an analysis on one of my clients, this was about 12 months ago, and we looked at all the key people in the company. And actually, they had the senior bit all sorted out. But when we went underneath, we realised that the person who was running operations, but was an operations manager rather than a director, because it was only a 30-40 person business, they were good. They were really good. But there was no one underneath them. So that role became at risk. So immediately we thought, well, actually, rather than just tying in all the obvious people, we needed to tie in that key person as well. And actually, when the event happened, which it did, that individual also got some shares and a nice payout as well. So it was fantastic. And also, it gave her a career path, because it wasn't obvious what her career path would be in a company of that size. So we got a junior person in, and that enabled her to learn new skills.
Okay, so if you're looking to sell in, let's say, 18 months' time, how do you start to pinpoint these people? Will it be obvious who your kind of the key people are? Do you need to do any exercises to understand who those key people are? Yeah,
well, I think what you've got to do, you've got to imagine what happens with that business post-event. So whether that's 1, 2 or 3 years afterwards, what does the org chart look like? And this is one of the starting points. And whenever I do work with any new company, the first session we always do is a strategy session. So regardless of whether they've got a 3-year plan or not, my job is to review it and improve it, a bit like Company in a Box, practice what I preach. But in this case, one of the first things I do is we create the org chart that will need to be there to deliver the 3-year plan. So we actually visually do it. You might not put the names in at that point, and then you reverse engineer it to the people that you've got. And then you start putting those names in. So by definition, you go, these are the roles that we need to deliver the future plan, whether that's via us delivering it or, of course, a buyer buying you. So you then look at it and it becomes clear because you see where the vacancies are. You see where there's a lack of skills. You see where there are holes in it. And if you do that earlier in the process, then you can do something about it. So like I said before, in that sort of learning and development plan, I can look across all of those sort of B-suite people. I can identify the key ones. I can tie them in with something like an EMI scheme. But there are some things that we can discuss about that in a minute, because I see people make mistakes quite often with EMI schemes. And then, you obviously reward them, but you can also develop them as well. So it's great for them, but also great for the business. So you're always looking ahead, reverse engineering it, and then working out what you need to do. And that defines who the key people are.
Yeah, I love that approach. Let's talk about the EMI schemes then. How do you get this right? Because if this goes wrong, I can imagine it being pretty costly.
It's incredible because lots of people have EMI schemes in place. And, the golden rules of EMI schemes are no dividends, no voting rights. If the person leaves the company, the shares come back into the business. So it's kind of, good for founders and a less risky model. And it's, HMRC approved, it's government backed, so people like it. The problem is that when someone's particularly buying a company, so unless it's an MBO, because obviously those team are just going to carry on anyway, but if you're buying a company, one of the key things you're likely to be buying is the team. Yeah. So if you're giving them a decent chunk of money at the point of an event, affectionately known as F-off money sometimes, that person might just leave. And so you're now losing it. So it's actually risky for a buyer. So guess what happens? They tie you in for a longer earnout again. So what you should do with an EMI scheme is you say that we will give you the payout because, legally you have to get the same way as the A-class shareholders get, their shareholding. So if you get, for example, 2/3 up front, me as an employee will get 2/3 of my element of the EMI scheme. However, you pay them 50% of it 6 months after that date, and the other 50% 12 months after that date. So now you've tied someone in for an extra year post the event. It becomes less risky for a buyer, and then, of course, better deals are more likely to happen. But actually, standard EMI schemes that most accountancy firms put in place, they don't think about this. They just go, oh, well, it's tied someone in for 3 or 4 years. This is what it is. It may or may not ever happen. And then they don't think about the exit. And it's a bit like when I see with founders, when they're doing their strategy sessions, they will produce a 3-year plan. And that's great. But most people, when they're buying company, they want a return on investment. So they want to see what happens after that. So if you get to 3 years and you've saturated your market and there is no growth and you've got no proof of diversification into something else, then they're going to go, well, why are we going to buy you? And I've seen this time and time again. It's people just aren't thinking further enough ahead because they're in amongst it. They're in amongst the weeds. They're firefighting. They deal with the day-to-day growth, which I understand. I get it. But it doesn't take much time to do a strategy session. Look, I do mine in an hour and a half. So, in an hour and a half, which is not a lot in the grand scheme of things, you can get that 3-year plan in place and think about all these things in advance. And so you avoid those bumps in the road.
Hour and a half to stick a 0 on the end of your exit is
incredible,
worth it,
and some more sometimes. It's amazing. But I'd say the two biggest things. Well, actually, it's probably 3 things. One, which is it gives you the confidence that you're making decisions that are right. Yeah. So here's my line in the sand. If I do this today, tomorrow, next month, next quarter, at least I know those decisions are in line with something. Whereas, of course, normally, if you're just making some money, hiring some people, making some money, spending some money, it's organic growth. It's what 95% of businesses do. It's not necessarily wrong, but it's certainly not as good as if you look further forward.
I guess they're operating like a lifestyle business rather than a business that is built to exit, right?
Absolutely. And again, when you start growing a company, people don't necessarily build it to exit. That's not necessarily wrong. I mean, if there's one person in a room, of course, you aren't thinking about exits typically. However, there is a point in that process, and relatively early on, I mean, I'd say within the first, as soon as you've got that first hurdle out of the way, you start making some revenue and you get your first few employees. To me, that's a great time to do a planning session. And that can be within the first year because you're already starting to make better business decisions because you've done it.
That's so smart. So far we've covered off, we've done company in a box, which was part 1, building your your data room, if you like, the management team and the B-suite. What are steps 5 and 6? Let's jump into those.
Great questions. So yes, the next one is aligning stakeholder expectations. Now you think that would naturally happen, but it doesn't. You know, I sit in lots of boards, and sometimes they've got investors, sometimes they've got sort of sleeping partners. There's all sorts of different arrangements people have, and so it's aligning your strategy to them. And again, sometimes that's in years in advance, rather than just waking up one day and going, right, I want to sell the company, I'm the majority shareholder, or I'm a significant shareholder in the company, and everyone else going, wait a second, we're not quite ready yet. You're actually thinking about it in advance. You're getting everyone aligned. It's actually a critical part of the process, because people naturally want different things done in different ways at different times. So without doing that, you know, it can cause problems. Now, for me, that's about communication. So just being open and honest, and as long as you communicate with people, most people will come on board. And of course, if you've got more time to think about it, sometimes people will get off the bike or the road or the journey at different times. And that's okay. And I think there's a guilt element, particularly with co-founders, or when there's multiple shareholders. They think, oh, I can't leave someone else in the lurch here. But that's okay if you communicate it and you come to an agreement, and then more often than not, then you can leave at different times. You just need to manage those processes. And by talking about it, they tend to be more effective.
So what are some scenarios where this might happen, right? It's if there's multiple co-founders and they own different proportions of the company potentially, or if it's a sole founder, maybe they've given some EMI shares to a few of the team. Are these the sorts of scenarios where this happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So it will be, I mean, obviously if you're a 100% shareholder, if you're doing an MBO so the team are buying it off you, then that's great, you know, because there's no particular issue there. It's only you and them making that decision. But even then, that's got to be communicated to the rest of the company to make sure that they're happy with it, because you've suddenly removed the person that hired them, developed them, trained them, and has been with them for 5-10 years, and they're the face of the business, and then you're suddenly disappearing. You know, there's an element of nervousness. What will it be like in that next stage of our development? If you've got investors in a company, again, you need to get them on board, because it's incredible the amount of time that I've seen investors. They start at the same time the process as the founders, and everyone wants the same thing at the start. You know, it's that honeymoon period. It's like, well, we all want the big exit or whatever it's going to be. Was actually in reality, over time, people want things done in different ways and different times. And so the boards can start separating out, and people want different things. And to be frank, that's kind of where, you know, I come in as part of my role. It's just to make sure that everyone's working together harmoniously and making sure that everyone's got the trust of me, because they can come to me, talk to me about what their plans are, and then I can manage those processes in the right way, because sometimes it's difficult for them to talk to each other directly about these things.
Sure.
So you just have to manage these processes to make sure that, you know, everyone gets what they want, because ultimately it does work out. You just got to be grown-ups about it.
Yeah. You mentioned MBO there, management buyout. What might change the way you exit? Because there are a number of different ways to exit, right? What are some scenarios where you might get an MBO?
Yeah. So if you've got a team of people who are very successful, and perhaps have already sort of raised a decent amount of money themselves in their own sort of personal circumstances, that makes it a lot easier, because, you know, it's less risky for them and they want to take it on. And I think quite typically when a founder just wakes up one day and goes, enough's enough, you know, I can't do this. I mean, to be fair, it tends to be a bit of a transitional process. It doesn't tend to be one day. You just kind of gonna go like this. And
I have a few days where I wake up and that's enough.
Well, to be fair, there's no founder ever who probably hasn't had those days. But in terms of actually thinking that, you know, enough's enough now, I've been here 5-10 years, whatever it is, and actually want to leave here, it's then just about having a conversation with those individuals. It's about, look, a day will arise. You don't just go, look, I'm leaving tomorrow. You know, again, it's planning ahead. A day will arise where this could happen. You know, I've got a few options that I could do. I could sell the company externally, which means obviously you have to report to someone else, or I could sell it to a private equity firm, and, you know, obviously they may or may not understand the business, or a collection of you could do it. And so you get the advice beforehand from people who've done it before, because if you've done that, then you're more likely to engage those individuals in the right way rather than putting your 2 feet in it, because everyone's made the mistakes before, so don't make the same mistakes that other people have already made. It's ridiculous. So seek out the advice, and then you're more likely to have a better approach and a better set of results. Now, they might not want to go for it, but that's fine. You've kind of started a conversation, you've got people thinking. But what you don't want to do is go down a path of saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do an event. I'm going to do an MBO. Key people are tied in. Everyone's motivated. They've worked for years to get to that point. At the end of it, pull the rug from underneath them. Because I've seen it before, and I've warned people before, where senior people in the company will just go, wait a second, I feel like I've been fleeced here. I've been conned. I worked here for 3 years, extra hard, all because you said that this event's going to happen. And at the last minute, you pulled the rug from underneath us. We're off, and they've gone. And those companies, and I've actually seen companies where they've done that, and 10 years later, they've had to build the company right up again because all the people have left, and they're trying to sell again 10 years later. And all they needed to do was to stick to their word at that time.
Costly mistake.
Costly. Now, I know some people have done it because they felt they didn't get the value from a buyer that they wanted.
Right.
But to be frank, I think they were being unrealistic in their valuation. And I think this is a final point on this particular one here that I talk to a lot of founders about, is that people have unrealistic views on what their business is worth because it's personal to them. So typically they think it's worth more than it actually is in the market. And sometimes it's because you hear about big deals being done. And if you're an SME or, a company with hundreds of staff and maybe sort of, millions or tens of millions of EBIT, and you hear about these really massive companies getting these huge multiples, that's because they're really massive companies. That's the reason why they're less risky, so people will pay more for them. They are the unicorns. And the other cause sometimes, I'm sorry for people that work in M&A here and corporate finance, but if a M&A company is charging a retainer, and so it might be £10,000 to £50,000 in advance to go to the market, to find potential buyers, produce a long list, do the information memorandum, do the short list, get involved in the meetings, blah 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 blah, plus they might get a success fee at the end of it. If they want to get that retainer, and they're a little bit spurious as a business and not confident they can necessarily find the buyer, then they will overvalue at the start, a bit like an estate agent might do.
Yeah.
So, they push up the price. The person goes, oh, great, I'm going to get this 8 times, 10 times multiple. They then pay the £40,000, £50,000 in advance. And at the end of it, they don't get the offers. They get it at 4 or 5 times, and it's been mismatched. It's finding the trusted partners. And certainly, I've worked with over the years some companies who have done multiple transactions with me. And so I know they can be trusted, and, they're there for the right reasons and not for the wrong ones.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to dive into multiples and what people can expect. Just before we do, there's one last step that people need to go through if they want to sell a company, which when you hear it sounds like quite an obvious one, actually, but I think it's something that a lot of people don't actually think about.
Yeah, it's thinking about the potential future buyer, who that's going to be, and starting to build relationships with them early. So, for example, if you're raising investment, it's one of the pieces of advice I give to founders at the start, which is start cultivating those relationships, start talking to investors, and then start proving to them that you're doing the things you said you're going to do, and it will give them confidence then to want to invest in you. Same thing with buyers. So put together, I would say, a hit list of, say, 10, 15, potentially even 20 potential buyers of the company or investors or whoever you think it might be. If it's the MBO team, start cultivating them in the way that I said before, and start meeting them. What you might do is you might get a board advisor to approach them first of all, so it's someone independent, and that can help. And then you meet them, you talk about your business, you talk about your plans. You're not selling tomorrow. As I said before, it's the worst thing you can do is to wake up today to say you're going to sell the business and sell it tomorrow. You plan these things years in advance. What you want is you want to be bought, not sold. And so by definition, you start cultivating these relationships. You keep communicating, maybe every 3 or 6 months, go out for dinner with them, go out for a drink with them, give them an update. Did you do the things you said you were going to do? If you are, and you're smashing it out of the park, you're in such a strong position, because then they will come to you at some point in the process and go, we want to buy you. Or when you're ready to sell, then you let them know. Say, by the way, we've got an M&A or corporate finance team who are going to be doing this for us independently, producing a long list. They will probably go, can we have exclusive rights? Or we want to put in an offer early before you go to market.
I guess best case scenario, you've got 3 or 4 of these people who all want to buy you.
Absolutely.
And then you've got a lot of power, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. Multiple offers will always be the best because it gives you that negotiation. So I'll give you a quick example. This one was probably about 18 months ago. A company managed to get 2 offers, which is great. One of them was 51% upfront and a 3-year earnout. The other one, 80% upfront and a 2-year earnout. And as it was actually a private equity company who were buying the business. So they actually converted the 20% into shares into that model because they wanted to go for the secondary event. They were too young to retire, so they wanted to be part of the secondary event. But when you look at that, you go, well, 51% upfront in 3 years, and then one which is 80% upfront. It's obviously way better for founders to work that way. So yeah, the more people you can get involved in the process, the more likely you are to get better offers, better negotiation, better valuation, better deal structure.
Amazing. Let's address the question that I think probably everyone that's got this far is probably wondering. What multiple can you expect? How much money are you actually going to sell your business for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it is very much a how long's a piece of string question because people in different niches, different size of companies, different types of events will get different deal structures. But there are some sort of commonalities behind it. For example, if you're going to do an MBO or partial MBO, typically, not always, but typically, you would have a slightly lower valuation because of the convenience of it. And probably because you want to pass it on to your team and almost as a reward for their help for enabling you to do what you want. So that is quite common. If it's private equity or VC, sometimes you can get some really good multiples because they need to tie you in for longer, but the earnouts won't be quite as good. And in other ones, you can be go straight away. So it will depend on your vertical. I would say that if you are a £1 million EBIT business, I mean, who knows what your recurring revenue is, and obviously if you're technology, and I'll talk about that in a minute because that will have a different type of multiple. But if you're a service sector, general commercial business, and you're about £1 million EBIT, you're probably going to be looking at around about a 5 to 6 sort of multiple. If you're 10 million, that might then go to 7. Certain sectors might be 7 to 8. And if you're technology, of course, the beauty of technology, particularly if it's a recurring revenue model, is that if you in a normal business to do £1 million profit, let's say that your profit margin was at 20%, you'd be doing 5 million of revenue, but you're getting your valuation on the 1 million, not the 5 million. Sure. Of course, if it's a recurring revenue technology business, you're getting a valuation, on the 5 million. So that 5 million, even if it was the same multiple, and let's just say it was at 6 or 7. You're getting 6 or 7 times the amount. That's a huge difference. So technology companies, typically that I see, if they're around about £1 million of annualized recurring revenue, they will probably be about 8. Somewhere around there. Yeah. Some a little bit less, but some will be around there. I mean, I did one recently. It was 1.5 million. We got 13 times
revenue. This is
Interesting. But that's unheard of. It's very unusual. We just managed to position that company in a great way, but it can be done. But if you start getting to 10 million of ARR, then you might be looking anywhere between 10 and 15, and if you're AI, before the bubble might burst, you might be looking at 15 and 20, and it will depend on your IP, your management team, your rate of growth, the investors. There's so many components to it, but hopefully it's just giving you a few ideas.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive into some of these scenarios. So technology recurring revenue business, your multiple is off revenue, not EBIT.
If it's a subscription base and recurring revenue, and of course a number of factors will come into play there. For example, if you have a monthly subscription based business, but the lifetime value of that is 1 month because people keep coming and going, the churn is 100%, then you're not going to get much valuation in terms of the revenue. In fact, you're not going to get much valuation at all. However, if you're on either annual contracts or biannual, even better, or that your lifetime value of each client is maybe sort of 3, 4, 5 years, then all of a sudden those multiples start coming into play.
Yeah, makes sense. And then you mentioned service-based before. If you're I've heard if you're below £1 million EBITDA on a service-based business, no one's probably going to be that interested. You've kind of got to get to that million mark.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's called sort of sub-size business. It always sounds a bit harsh and patronising. Someone's put their heart and soul into business. It hasn't quite got to £1 million.
Someone's doing 500k profit. They're in the top 1%.
95 of businesses in the world are less than £1 million EBIT, so it's a little bit harsh. However, you can you can get valuations. I've advised companies that have been bought. I had one that was doing £350,000 of EBIT, got 5.5 times multiple.
Pretty good.
So again, if it's the right sector, it's a strategic buyer, it can be done. But as a general rule, if you can get your company to subscription, and I know not every company can, but if you can, or an element of what you're doing, certainly the majority of the overall revenue, you're more likely to get the better revenue, and you're more likely to have more people, even if you're sub £1 million of EBIT, because people might look at it as they're less concerned about the profit, more concerned about the revenue growth.
Interesting.
Particularly investors, because if they put lots of money into the business, they don't want the money just sitting in the bank account. They want you to spend it to invest it. So actually, you might not be massively profitable because you're spending it all for future growth. So timing is everything, because if you can time revenue growth doing what it needs to do, plus profit growth at the same time, plus company growth, which is the holy trinity of running a company, then that's the ideal time to be selling, because you're on the up. You're not plateaued. There's loads of scale still to go, and you've proven that you can increase profit and revenue growth at the same time as still investing in your company.
Interesting. So let's go for a scenario where maybe it is service based, but it's a recurring revenue service business, million EBITDA, let's say, but that revenue mark and profit are both going in the right direction. They're both increasing year on year.
Yeah.
That's quite an attractive proposition, I can
it
imagine.
is. I affectionately call it the magic million.
Yeah.
And I'd say most SMEs, those ones, when they come to me, who are sub £1 million, that's their first goal. That's what they want to get to.
Yeah.
But you work it around the other way. So what we don't want to fall into the trap of is doing what 95% of business to do, which is organically. So we've made £1 million. Now we think about exiting. What you should be doing is going, well, what do I want? If I want a business that's worth, for example, 10 million, there's no point getting to $1 million in a traditional service-based business, because you're not going to get a 10 times multiple. It's just not going to happen. So by definition, you've got to go forward and go, what does the company need to look like in terms of structure, but also financial numbers, to then reverse engineer it and make sure you're getting to those numbers, because that will be the trigger point. Because you'll go, I know if I can get to 1.5 million, maybe 2 million, now I'm starting to get in the right sort of ballpark, and then I might get nearer that £10 million valuation.
Yeah.
So you should do it the other way round, rather than, wow, we've got to 1 million, now I'm going to go and sell, is not the right philosophy for me. And typically you limit yourself. If you go the other way and go, well, what do I want? So forget history. Forget everything that you know, and all the mistakes and all the things that have gone wrong and all the pain that you've had in growing your company to this point. Forget all that for a second. What do I want to achieve? Within reason. There's no point saying £1 billion company if you're nowhere near it. But you can then go, right, well, let's say I wanted a business that was 10 million, so 2 million EBIT rather than 1 million. Don't be limited by that. Set it at 2 million. Create the business in an org chart, create the business in terms of your strategy, all the key milestones you need to do to achieve it, reverse engineer that, and then that will give you the decisions where you look at it and go, can we do this? Is this possible? What do we need to do to make it happen? If you can't solve those solutions, you're being too ambitious in the timescales. But if you can solve it, the chances are you probably push yourself further ahead than you would have done previously.
I guess worst case, you fall slightly short. You get 6, 7, 8 million instead of the 10.
Absolutely, but more than you would have done otherwise.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's just summarise a few of the conditions, if you like, of a great exit. Helps if you have recurring revenue, strong leadership team in place. That was good. You, of course, want multiple buyers. What other things might kind of create the conditions for a great exit?
I think market conditions and timing can be everything. I know two people who both tried to sell their company just before the last financial crash. One got it over the line beforehand, and then was seen driving around in a whatever Ferrari, but that's up to them. But the other person, 10 years on, was still running their company.
Really?
So timing could be everything. Now, you might say that's an element of luck, but the thing is about anything in life, the further it is from here, the more risky it is. So don't get greedy. Now, I know everyone talks about the Mark Zuckerberg story and Yahoo offering $1 billion, and now look at it now, and that's all fine, but that's pretty unique. 99.9% of company that's never going to happen to. So what you want to do is to go, what is that line in the sand? What's that number that I'm looking for? And then when you get to that point, actually probably going to market at that point, if you don't have to say yes, but going it to market at that point is a really smart thing to do without getting too greedy, because, when's enough? And what you can do, of course, is once you've banked your first X, then you can do other things with it, but with less of the risk. So I'd say timing is very important. Planning is absolutely the most critical thing. I know I've talked about it quite a lot during this, but to me it is absolutely essential. And I can recognise a company which have been planned and not planned. And it's amazing how many founders say to me, "Oh, plans are rubbish. It's not worth the paper they're written on." All this kind of, it's rubbish, because that means they've got the wrong plan. That means they've not done it right. They've not got the right people in place. They're not in the right market or whatever it is. But and people say to me, "Well, financial forecasts." Well, okay, you can base it on previous data, but it's all guesswork. But it's guesswork based on risk assessment. It's based on facts. It's based on what you're going to do in a business. It's only guesswork if you haven't gone into the future and this is what the business needs to look like, and then reverse engineered it. So, there's a couple of things I think absolutely critical that can make a major impact. And the other thing, as I say, is getting out there. So brand, is obviously a critical one, because, it's incredible how many companies, when you see, are just about to float on the stock exchange or NASDAQ or whatever, they're everywhere.
Yeah,
they are everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So, you want to be out there and, whether it's through PR or whatever you're doing, and there's a number of different marketplaces, aren't you? And this is teaching you to suck eggs, but, for everyone else, you've got internal communications. You want the team bought in, excited about where you're going. You've got external communications, which could be for potential buyers or investors. It could be that, you're trying to attract employees into the company. You're trying to win new business. So there's a number of different strategies you're going to do, but you want to be everywhere as much as possible, all at once, because people will be looking about you. And when you make the approach, or when an M&A person makes the approach to those companies, they're going, "I've heard about these people. They've been," and they do the due diligence. "Oh, they've won awards recently. They've done this. They've done that. Looks like a well-run business." I like the fact that they're out there.
So good. Finally, then, if there are maybe one or two things a founder who's thinking about exiting in, let's say, 18 months to 2 years, 3 years, if there's one or two things they can start doing today to set them up for that event, what would you advise they do?
Well, people would obviously expect me to say this, but get someone in who's done it before. But don't get someone who's done it before once. Because the problem with that is, even though someone's built and sold a company before, and it might have sold and been super successful, what's right for one company isn't necessarily right for another company, and vice versa. So someone who's got a lot of experience, that then they can pull from different experiences and find different models and different approaches which will be the right one for your company. So I think getting an advisor in early is very important. Get that plan sorted as early as possible. So think 3 years, 5 years too far away, less than 3 years too short term. And even if you're looking to sell in 18 months, a buyer's going to want to know what you're doing 18 months after that. So it won't be a waste of time. Build it, reverse engineer it, get it across every single key milestone in the business. So whether that's your milestones for winning new business, for revenue, for employees, for geographical locations or focus you're going to be working on, your EBIT number, possibly your average yield per head, or a billings per head, profitability. All these things, gross profit or revenue to profit, what's dropping to EBIT, all of these things are essential components. If you've got those things in place, you're more likely to be making better decisions, and you're more likely to get better deals at the end of it.
You've really given away the blueprint here. This has been absolute gold. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Alex. So thank you so much for giving up your time and spending it with us today. This has been absolutely brilliant. I know any listeners that have stayed to the end will have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So, Alex, thank you so much. For anyone that wants to check out more of your work or potentially bring you in to help them with an exit, where's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn's great. So, Alex Arnot, Arnot. Just DM me on there. That's fine. Otherwise, you can go to my website, which is alexarnot.com. Otherwise, they can contact you, and you can pass on the message.
I'd be happy to. Those will be linked in the show notes as well, so check those links out if you want to see more of Alex's work.